Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Invin and today I'm going to be bringing you guys a video on my best Bruiser class for 1.1. Now some of you guys will see that this is very similar to the class I did obviously near the start of the launch of the game, but this one obviously is updated with the 250 strength kind of glitch being fixed, and also a few little things that you need to be aware of going forward, how you can counter things like the Void Gauntlet, of course, because it's very, very powerful right now, as a lot of you will know, and of course giving you guys a full breakdown on what armor you can use, what gems to use, and of course what attributes and weapon perks to use as well. So we're going to jump straight into this one here then. First of all, we're looking at, of course, the armor setup. For those of you that don't know, this is the Void Bent gear, and it's the heavy gear that I've got on. So I've got the Void head, chest, gloves, leggings, and then boots. Right now I'm just wearing the Covenant ones, so it's literally just faction gear. That is because before this patch I was actually going to be playing Paladin, so I was going to get a fortified sacred ground buff perk on my shoes. Right now I'm not going to do that, so I could potentially get some Void Bent shoes if I want to, which I think is probably the next play, but I do also want to save that slot if I do want to increase it with any of my weapon perks as well, because some of those can go on armor pieces. In terms of gems then, I would recommend Onyx gems for this. Diamond ones can also be good, and any sort of resistances to elemental are also pretty decent, but I prefer the Onyxes simply because if you look in the bottom left, you'll see that elemental resistances are pretty high by default with the Void Bent armor, whereas physical are very much less so. So in my opinion, I go for the Onyxes to try and balance that out a little bit more, get a little bit more physical out of this as well, so it makes it kind of a little bit more balanced. Obviously, I'm aware the shield doesn't give me any buffs or stats or anything like that, but I do just like the look of it. I think it looks cool, so I keep it on for that reason. In terms of weapons, then, we're using the Great Axe, and we're also using the Warhammer. These two are both really, really good weapons. The Great Axe is actually the one from the Legendary or the Epic Weapon quest there. Gives 28 strength, which is excellent. It also gives Fortifying Whirlwind. If you do use that, it's great. And also Corrupted Bane, which is good for the endgame elite farms, all that kind of good stuff there. So I like this one a lot. It does a lot of damage, and it's one of the highest gear score ones that I have found with the right stats. So for now, I'm sticking with that one. And of course, on the Warhammer here, then the gear score is pretty low right now, but it's plus 25 strength, which is ideal. And of course, then I have got Sundering Shockwave, which is kind of the main thing here. Now, something to note, the last patch, this was reduced in effectiveness to come kind of more in line with Armor Breaker from the second strand of the Juggernaut tree there in obviously the actual skills from the Warhammer. But it's still very, very good. It's the only ability where you've got a Shockwave surround AoE that drops that Sundering on, so it's really, really good. So obviously gives basically the enemy gets rend, reducing the target's damage absorption by 8.8% for 10 seconds, which is still a decent amount. It's not, you know, quite the 15 to 20% we were seeing before, but it is still really, really good. I've then got Lifesteal on there as well. So on the Warhammer there, I have put on the Malachite gem. This one basically gives me plus 12% damage against targets with an active crowd control status, so slow, stun, or root. Really, really good with the Warhammer. And then on the Great Axe here, then I've gone for Opportunist, and this one gives me plus 20% damage against targets with less than 30% HP. Essentially, the Great Axe is where I'm going to be doing the predominant amount of damage. The Warhammer is for CC, and of course, when they do get low, pulling out this Great Axe, you already will see from the passives that I use, it does a lot of damage to people under 30% health. So with this on, it's an extra 20% damage. Crazy, crazy numbers. You're seeing 2.5, 2.6k hits when they're on that low HP, which can completely wipe the target out very, very fast and will upset a lot of people. So, of course, you do want to be using it. Now, in terms of how this build works, it's worth mentioning on this screen as well that we are also using Roasted Rabbit with Seasoned Vegetables food, which is a plus 40 constitution food. And when we go over attributes in just a second here, you'll see why this is important. But you will need to get a decent amount of that for this build to be as successful as it possibly can be. In terms of jewelry then as well, we're using the Infinity Crystal right here. This one gives us Strength, Divine, Health, and Fortified. Really, really good perks all round. So I just like to keep that one on. And of course, it gives us a Strength, which is perfect because both of these weapons scale solely from strength. Then secondly here we've got the ring, and this one is a 21 constitution ring. It's with a lucky one, so it's with one of those pearls. Then I've got slash damage, which is increased, which is really, really good with the Great Axe. And infected disease you apply, it lasts 30% longer. For me, that's kind of a dud roll right now, but it's the best one I've been able to get for now, so I'll kind of see about improving that in the future. But currently the stat and the secondary perk is really, really good. And then on the earring here, we've got plus 24 strength. Really, really good gear score on it as well. Then it's also got a gem in which which gives it 1.9 physical and 0.63 elemental absorption, so really, really good. A little bit of defense on both of those there. Refreshing Toast, which is really, really good, so that is when potions are on cooldown, it's 28% faster, which is brilliant. And then you'll see that you generate 14% more fret. That one, again, is kind of a dud perk. I'd prefer to have something maybe like Hearty, where you get extra stamina, but for now, again, that's the best one I've got, so it's really, really decent. Moving into the attributes here then, so you guys can see that I've used up pretty much all of my points, and it's almost fully into strength and then 160 into constitution. That is why I said you'll need the 40 boost, because that gets you up to 200 con and then 282 strength, which is really, really nice. So on the constitution attribute perks, then we've got consumables at 20% stronger on the 50 points. On the 100 points, we've got increase max health by 10% of your physical armor, which is really nice. And then on this third one here, you get minus 10% critical damage taken. That's always active. Then when you are in a PvP or PvE environment where you want to be at your maximum build, then you throw on this 40 extra food, which gets you up to this 200 mark, and that is plus 20% increase to armor, which is really, really good with the void set, of course, and it makes this build very, very viable. And as you guys will see, 129 of these points are actually from the armor and the equipment I've got on, so a little bit from the jewelry like you saw, but mostly from that void bent armor, because they do give 25 per piece, so it is really, really important to have that on for this build. If you haven't got that, again, getting something with full constitution on the armor pieces is going to be vitally important for this, so bear that in mind. That is part of the build as well. So we've got to 282 strength here. The first perk is plus 5% melee to light attacks. Second one is 10% damage with heavy attacks, which is really good for the Warhammer, as you'll see with the perks in just a moment. The third one here is plus 50% stamina damage from melee weapons in light and heavy attack, which is really good against fighting people in PvP environments, and of course boss enemies as well. Then on this 200 perk here, you've got plus 10% damage to stunned, slowed, or rooted enemies. This, additionally to the Malachite gem, is really, really good and does a lot of damage to those targets when they are stunned. And then at the 250 mark here, we get stamina regen is faster while performing light or heavy attacks with a melee weapon. In other words, when you're not blocking, you're going to be getting a lot more stamina back very, very quickly. Now, if you did want to boost up to 300 strength to get yourself that grit on the light and heavy attacks, it is very, very good. But for me, with having a lot of grit on both of the heavy attacks anyway with these weapons, with the perks that I take, I personally don't feel that it's necessary, because the only time I'm really light attacking is when I'm spamming if someone is trying to run away from me to catch them up with a great attack. So usually it's going to be heavy attacks or abilities. So for me personally, I don't max that to 300. I find it fine at 282 with the 200 con. But if you do want to, you can take a few points out of con, not quite get up to that 200 mark. But if you're not as bothered about that and you want to do a little bit more damage with a little bit less health, then that is the way you can kind of switch this build up as well. Then when we go on to weapon mastery here, then of course we're using the Great Axe and the Warhammer, you guys know. The abilities that I've taken is the Reap, the Gravity Well, and the Charge. The Charge I haven't upgraded at all. I've just left it just as a utility, as a reposition, as an attack, as a catch-up, whatever I need to use. It's just there as a utility one. I've then got Reap, which is fully upgraded, which means that it gets extra range there with the second one. It heals for 30% of damage done with the second upgrade there. And on the third upgrade, it does a spin attack after your pull, which deals 115% weapon damage. Basically means you could do a little combo. You can hit 2 light attacks, pull them back, spin round, and then hit 2 more light attacks. So you're essentially getting 6 hits in the space of 3 hit frame, which is really, really nice. And same with Charge as well. If you attack twice and then press the button, you will be able to actually attack the enemy a third time very, very quickly. So you can then reset and actually get 2 more lights after that. So essentially a 5-hit combo, which is nice. And then, of course, on the Gravity Well here, we take both of the upgrades so that we get extra damage for each foe caught in the void by 10%. And then the final one here, which is allies gain 10% Fortify. Again, this works on yourself as well, so it's really, really good to have this one down in the middle of a fight. Blocks enemies in, does damage, and gives you extra Fortify, which is great. On the passives, we've got the Mauler side of stuff, which is if you're holding a Great Axe and are below 50% health, you gain 40 stamina, which is nice. We've got Enduring Strike. This one adds grit to heavy attacks and grants 20% damage reduction during the heavy attacks, so any hits that you do receive don't stagger you and you take less damage from them, which is really good. And then of course we've got down here Crowded Protection, which is while holding the Great Axe you gain 10% absorption when 3 or more foes are within 4 meters. Basically this build is all about staying alive and being as tanky as much as possible whilst dealing a very, very good amount of damage, so the perks kind of reflect that as well. Mainly on the Reaper side then, this is where we've kind of got a lot of them. Light attacks with your Great Axe give you a stack of 5% damage, and you can get 3 stacks of that. Increase armor penetration of the Great Axe attacks by 10% against foes below 50% HP. So anyone that's under half HP, you're doing 10% extra armor pen to those. Then you've got one that is you heal yourself for any criticals done by 10% of the crit damage. Then the next one here is when your attacks are blocked, you gain 15% damage for 10 seconds, which is really nice, especially in Wars and Outpost Rush. Then we've got Keen Edge here, which is critical damage increased by 10%, which is really, really good. Then we've got Great Axe attacks against foes below 30% HP have the 15% increased critical chance. Obviously then they also have extra armor pen, extra critical damage on that when you do hit it. And as we saw before, below 30% HP we're doing 20% extra damage, so that syncs up really nicely. And then feeds into this one here, which is called Feed nicely, which is then Great Axe attacks against foes below 30% HP. Heal you for 10% of the damage done. Obviously doing 20% more damage, you've got more chance of getting a crit. That crit's going to do more damage, so more heals overall. Really, really nice combo, can get you right back up in that HP. And then of course we take Bloodlust here, which is kind of the ultimate ability if you like from the Reaper side, and that one is you move 30% faster and deal 15% more damage when looking at a foe within 1.3 meters. So this works really, really well, keeps you alive, allows you to have a lot of catch up, a lot of ability to sustain yourself, whilst also dealing a ridiculous amount of damage. And as you guys will have probably seen, if you've played against a Great Axe or you've played with one, you know it's pretty busted right now, particularly after the buffs there, because obviously those worked really, really well in its favour. Couple of things to be aware of with the Great Axe. Obviously after the latest patch, the gravity well is slightly different now. It works as intended, so you're not going to see those slows for extra time. But we have also seen heavy pull being fixed, so if you do want to throw a heavy pull on, which is where the attacks pull them closer to you, that actually works now. And we've also seen a default grit added to Whirlwind. When you've got something like Fortifying Whirlwind on your weapon, this makes this become very, very good. So you can always try this one out if you do want to as well, and I would recommend swapping this for the Reap build, throwing in these ones and then taking the same passives. In that respect, you wouldn't actually be able to get the Bloodlust here, so you would probably want to take Mauler's Fury, or you could indeed take these, maybe upgrade Charge a little bit as well instead of some of the other passives here, and still try and take Bloodlust if you do want it. It's up to you how you want to build it, but it's worth throwing in there as well. And just to mention as well that the Gravity passive no longer increases the duration of all pulls, so this is the Gravity one, which is this one right here, and it now does, after you cause a pull, your foe is rooted for 0.25 seconds. For me, I didn't find this as useful as some of the other perks here, but it does work with Reap quite nicely, so if you do want to put that one on as well, you could swap that out for maybe one of the other ones, but I would definitely keep Enduring Strike, as that's where you get your grit for your heavy attacks. Moving then on to the Warhammer, let's have a look at this one here. We've got ability-wise Wrecking Ball, Shockwave, and Path of Destiny. You'll see that I have the ultimate ability on the Crowd Crusher side, but also have quite a few of them here on the Juggernaut side. So on the Juggernaut side, obviously we've got Wrecking Ball. We've fully upgraded that, which means that we gain Fortify, which is 20% damage reduction for 7 seconds when you hit somebody with it. And you also have Breathing Room, which is all targets within 1.5 meters are also hit by a Flattened. So essentially on a point in a war, really, really overpowered. Same in Outpost Rush when you get ganked. A lot of players on you, you're on a point, whatever. Throw this down, you're flattening 3 or 4 people. And one thing to really note that's important about Wrecking Ball in this game is it's one of the only abilities where the stun is not broken by damage. So although Shockwave will give them a kind of a stagger, same with Path of Destiny, as soon as enemy players then receive damage from another source, whether they're shot by a ranged guy, somebody else hits them, that CC is gone. Whereas with Wrecking Ball, they're flattened on the floor, you can hit them as many times as you want, they can take as much damage as they physically can, literally as many people can hit them, and they don't get back up. So it's one of the best CC abilities in the entire game, and I really, really like it, so I would strongly recommend you guys take this one. It's exceptionally useful and very, very good in pretty much all situations there. In terms of Shockwave, then we take obviously the first upgrade here, which is giving targets weakness, which reduces their attacks by 10% for 10 seconds, which is really good. And of course then the Meteoritic Crater, which expands the range of Shockwave to a 4 meter radius. Then of course we take Sundering Shockwave, which adds a rend to those targets as well by 8.8% for 10 seconds. So it basically means that Shockwave is a very, very good reducing one. So they've less damage, they take more damage, and they're staggered for a little bit until you hit them as well. Really, really good ability. And then finally, Path of Destiny here again, we fully upgrade this one so that it now staggers all targets in its path. And a second upgrade there is the ability cooldown is reduced by 5% for each enemy hit. So again, doing this onto a point or an objective in a war or outpost rush, or indeed even in PvE, this is really, really good as it refreshes very, very quickly. In terms of the passives then, we take Hammer Time up here, which is where you gain Empower on a heavy attack, increasing the damage done by 20% for 4 seconds. Again, really, really good, and you'll see that the hammer is basically geared towards doing as many heavy attacks as you can. So that falls in with this next one, where you get Grit with the heavy attack, and also grants 20% damage reduction while in heavy attack phase, similar to the Great Axe there. We then also have Contemplation here, which is where you increase the heavy attack damage by 15% against targets under 30% health. This one is great if you're doing abilities and then they drop low. Obviously, like I said there, we've geared the Great Axe towards finishing those kills off, but this one gives it a little bit more chance. If you are still on the Warhammer, you get a glitchy switch or whatever, which does sometimes happen. You're still going to be able to do a big amount of damage with this one, which is really, really nice. Then we've got Quick Recovery, which is heavy attacks that hit, reduce cooldowns by 7% just across the board. Exceptionally good perk there to have. I would always recommend you run that one. Very, very useful. And then you've also got Power Through Pain, which is where you deal 35% extra damage for 1 second after taking damage. Again, in any situation, PvP or PvE, you're going to be taking damage pretty much all the time when you're fighting. So every time you do, you deal 35% extra damage. So it's really, really nice, particularly if you're in the animation of a heavy attack. You take less damage from the grit there, and then you do more damage when it lands. It's a very, very good combo. In terms of Crowd Crusher, then we also take I Can Do This All Day, which is reduce stamina consumption by 30% whilst blocking melee attacks. Also, for those of you that don't know, with the Warhammer, you actually have the same block efficacy as the Sword and Shield, which means you can block the same amount of damage, albeit without the passives, of course, from the Sword and the Shield, which are very, very good, and the abilities there, which give you more stamina regen and stuff. But this one is still really, really good, and of course, with this ability here, reduces the consumption by 30% when blocking melees. It's really, really nice. Then we have Facilitated Expedition. This one is after hitting a target with an active debuff. You gain haste, increasing your movement speed by 15% for 3 seconds. This is really, really good and will give you a good amount of catch-up as well with the Warhammer. Then Concussive Impact, which is deal 15% increased damage against targets affected by Warhammer debuffs. All of these give a debuff, so this is, again, really, really good. And then finally here, in terms of normal passives, we've got Prevailing Spirit, and this one is regain 35% of damage dealt as health when using a Crowd Crusher ability. Again, either of these two then, so it's Shockwave or Path of Destiny, will give you 35% of the damage you dealt back as HP, which is a nice bit of sustain there to have as well. Kind of pairs up nicely with the Great Axe abilities. And finally, I take Aftershock, which is again the ultimate ability here on this side, and this one is wherever a target is affected by crowd control effect, they are slowed by 20% for 4 seconds. Again, making it easier to get that catch up, especially when you switch to the Great Axe, finish those kills off. You can do really, really well with all of these abilities here, so I would certainly recommend checking out this build. It is also worth noting here with the Warhammer that Armor Breaker now has Lasting Trauma, which increases the rend effectiveness from 15 to 20% in the latest update, so you're now going to be way more effective with that one. You also have some buffs to Mighty Gravel, buffs to Wrecking Ball, Clear Out, Shockwave, which has had reduced effectiveness, and Path of Destiny, which has had the Leeching Path of Destiny item perk fixed, so if you do want to use that one, you can use that effectively now as well. But overall, this one has had generally quite a big buff, except from what I mentioned there with Sunder and Shockwave. So again, any of these abilities are going to be much better than they were before, and it's certainly worth trying out after this latest patch. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this build and this video for 1.1. It's going to be the kind of best Bruiser style class that I've found. I tried Paladin before, still working a little bit with the 45 buffs, but for me, this has been way more fun. So it's going back to my original roots more in the game and going for that Great Axe Warhammer Bruiser style build. If you guys have enjoyed today's video, please do make sure that you drop a like on it down below, as it really just helps support me and my content here on YouTube. If you are new to the channel, then make sure you do drop a subscribe, as I do upload every single day, so I would love to have you here as part of my channel community. Other than that, guys, as always, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for your time. Take care and peace.